We've been getting a lot of viewer questions about how the coronavirus is impacting our daily lives. And today we're bringing on Dr. Vania Singh. She's the former chief medical officer in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, also a professor there at Stanford University. Doctor, we want to start with something the president said today about possible treatments involving malaria medications. Here's what he said, then I'll get your comment.
It's a very powerful drug for malaria and also for various forms of very serious arthritis, but we think it has a very serious, very good impact on what we're talking about with respect to the virus.
Doctor, what would be your thought on that? Is this something that might help?
Yes, I think this is absolutely positive news, and one that the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Stephen Hahn, who was also present at the press conference, noted that the malaria drug, chloroquinone and hydroxychloroquinone, will be going through clinical trials to examine the efficacy. But the most important news is that this medication is already on the market, has indications, and there's an understanding of the safety profile. So it's really about efficacy and ensuring that there are no other untoward effects, and it will be used for compassionate use in some cases.
Okay, now to our viewer questions. The first one says, can you carry the virus home on your clothing? The person has a friend with an immunocompromised child, and he takes everything off in the garage, bags it all up, puts it in the washer before going inside the house. This person is wondering, is that necessary?
Well, you know, there is a recent study that came out 2 days ago, actually, that was sponsored by the NIH, CDC, UCLA, and Princeton. And it's a really good question that the person asks, because the study found that the coronavirus, COVID-19, is actually stable on certain surfaces, even up to several days on steel and plastic, but certainly on clothing, in the air. And so it's a really good question to ask, especially when you're concerned about a sick child or someone who's more vulnerable or perhaps at high risk. And I think in this case, it makes sense to take the precautions while we're still trying to figure out, even though the virus is stable, what contribution does it actually have in transmission from those surfaces. So I would say that it's reasonable at this time to take the caution, particularly because there's no downside to it.
All right, doctor, our second question. The person wrote, I don't recall hearing about young children and pregnant women. Is their risk the same as seniors?
Yeah, great question. I mean, in this age right now, our big concern is to contain the transmission of the disease. And when you look at all the unprecedented steps that are being taken right now in terms of shelter in, social distancing, the repeated importance of hand washing, hand hygiene, etc., you can understand why it's vital to be aware of those that might be vulnerable, particularly those who may be pregnant and young kids. With pregnancy, there hasn't been a demonstration just yet of vertical transmission, that means from the mother to the baby. However, we know that pregnant women may have a decreased immunity, and as we would be in any case, we would probably be more concerned and careful around them. And I think that we should continue to do that as we would even otherwise, whether it was about coronavirus or not, and take those precautions that are necessary. As far as young kids, I think Dr. Fauci mentioned just yesterday, in fact, that kids in the United States thus far, 19 and younger, haven't been seen to have anything but mild to moderate disease. But, you know, it's always important to understand, I mean, when we're talking about children, that are there underlying medical issues? Are they potentially immunocompromised? And I think in general, just as a society and adults, we tend to want to be careful with our children. So I would certainly advise that the good precautions and hygiene, and really the assumption if somebody feels like they may have symptoms or may have come in contact with somebody, to be cautious is always the right way forward, especially at this time when we try to contain the virus and the spread of it, so we don't overwhelm our resources, and more importantly, we don't actually put high-risk people at greater risk.
A third person wrote, should you be more cautious about package deliveries and bringing home takeout food? If so, what do you recommend when you bring those items inside your house?
Yeah, another really great question. This goes back to the study that came out just a couple of days ago, again by NIH in their NIAID division with CDC. And again, it really pertains to this understanding that this virus, the coronavirus, COVID-19, is stable on certain surfaces. And I think with takeout and packages from delivery from Amazon or other companies, the concern would be like, what does the cardboard represent? Can it have the virus on it? And that study showcased that the virus could be stable for up to 24 hours. How much is that virus that's stable on a cardboard actually partaking in the transmission? That's not a well-known figure, and there's certainly going to be follow-up to this study. So I would advise that we take those situations and certainly do extra caution of hand hygiene, washing your hands with soap for 20 seconds, or using the hand sanitizer. Or if you have high-risk people in your household, those who are older or are sick, have underlying medical conditions, possibly ensuring that there is minimized contact or disposing of those items so they don't come in contact with it, and then ensuring that you're washing your hands and keeping a safe distance.
Doctor, we're almost out of time, but before we let you go, we need to ask you about what the governor said today. He wrote a letter to President Trump saying that half of California, which would be about 25 million people, could be infected by coronavirus in the next 8 weeks. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think these are probably modeling that's going on in terms of worst case scenarios, and the actions that we see being taken, certainly in New York, Washington State, and here in the Bay Area are important because they are trying to minimize the chances of such a scenario taking place. When you look at what's happened in South Korea, it looks like their peak may have happened and the number of new cases daily is decreasing, and the hope is that would be the case here. But I would advise the viewers who are concerned for good reason to continue to take caution and follow the shelter-in guidelines and keep the social distancing going, even while we get cabin fever. And perhaps some people may think that this is overblown. I think the most important thing is we do our part as individuals for our community, for our country, really for the world, to showcase that we can help contain this while the antiviral treatments come into play, like the anti-malarial, and even more importantly, the vaccine, which we know the new trials just started on Monday. So I would just state that continue to do and prepare for the very worst case with hope, and really as a reminder to your audience, as we're all going through this, to minimize the anxiety, because we know anxiety and stress are definite negative health consequences.
Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Dr. Singh, we appreciate your time this afternoon. Tonight. Thank you so much.
And